Thanks, everybody. Looking to resume our regular meeting of council for Monday, June the 25th, 7 p.m. to actually marginally past 7:03. We acknowledge we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people as I welcome you here into council chambers this evening. Looking for approval of our agenda.
So moved, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Public participation time. This is an opportunity, folks, for you, those of you. And yes, we have a on microphone up there. Come to the podium and have a conversation.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amanda and I run the Greater Victoria Green Team program. And I'm here in support of the grant I submitted to you recently. So our plan is to organize 3 Green Team activities in Colwood, engaging 100 volunteers and 50 students. The parks will include Havenwood Park, Cobourg Peninsula, and another park to be discussed. So I'm here in support of the grant. If you have any questions, I might not be able to stay for my portion, but I was asked that it would be a good idea for me to be here.
Okay, just looking. That 6.1, what we can try and do, perhaps, Amanda, is move it up a bit, maybe ahead of just past the presentations.
Okay.
Perhaps, if that'll help facilitate you.
Yep, definitely.
Council, would that be agreeable to move that one item forward?
Great, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience this evening? And third and final. Seeing none, we shall move on. Mayor's message. I have a few points of time to note. Canada Day, of course, is fast approaching this Sunday, July the 1st, and Fort Rod Hill is graciously hosting the usual extravaganza on their site, so hopefully many of you will be there enjoying the sunshine. The always glad and happy to be down and visiting City Hall. Your property taxes are due on Tuesday, July 3rd by the end of business day. Correct, Mr. Finance? Eats and Beats, Saturday, July the 7th. That is our annual event down at the Cobourg Peninsula. Live music all day, food truck festival, street market, paddling, e-bikes. There's a number of activities that will be happening as well down there. So we look forward to seeing you throughout the day on Saturday, July the 7th. Rock the Shores is doing its annual event. They had a bit of a hiatus last year because of the Canada 150 celebrations, but they're back in full force for July 13th through 15th. 25 plus unforgettable musicians will be there entertaining the folks on those 3 days. So we're hoping for good weather for them as well. And in continuance, summer is here, and as you are all aware, Beach Food Fridays has hit the beach. Fridays and Saturdays, actually, each week throughout the summer and concluding in, where's my, Sandra's not here. That will probably be an early September conclusion. So that's what I have for activities that are going on. Anybody else?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had the opportunity last Thursday of attending the Indigenous Peoples Day at Royal Roads. It was a fabulous time. They had dancing and singing and all sorts of groups out there. First Nations sports groups, et cetera, et cetera. I got to watch the Premier arrive on a canoe. I must say he looked a little bit uncomfortable, but he was wearing a shamrock cap. So
that's what made him look good.
So that was a great event, a very good crowd. And I'd also like to see if anybody noticed the big fence in front of the parking lot. Those are not grave plots being put up. That's not for City Council. This is our new community garden. Those garden plots will be available to residents to plant vegetables and so on. The people I ran into when I came to City Hall wanted to, the organizers of this wanted me to pass on to staff how grateful they are for the fantastic support they've got from staff. So I'll pass that on if the Chief Administrative Officer can communicate that forward. Thank you.
And on top of that, they're always looking for volunteers to help get that garden in readiness, so we can hook you up with that organization as well. Anybody else? Seeing none, we shall move on then for adoption of minutes for June the 4th, June 11th, and June 18th. You have something to note in?
No, just move adoption.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Receipt for one set of minutes, the public hearing on June the 18th.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Presentations and delegations. This evening, we are receiving a presentation of long-range facility plans and capital plan through the School District 62, and I see we have a number of folks there. Robby and Diane and Jim and Harold.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council, Colwood staff, and residents and community members. My name is Robby Parmar, and I serve as a trustee and chair of the Sooke School District Board of Education. I'm joined by my colleague Diana Seaton, a trustee as well. I'm joined by, to make our presentation this evening, our Secretary Treasurer Harold Cull, and someone you probably know very well, our soon-to-be leaving Superintendent Jim Cambridge. This is one of his last final presentations before he retires at the end of July after a 37-year career in the Sooke School District. So exciting times in Sooke, exciting times in Colwood. We are here to share with you our long-range facilities plan. It is exciting to be a trustee in SD 62. When I visit the other school districts in the province and meet other trustees, I hear about the challenges they're facing with low enrollment and closing schools, and we know how important local schools are to our communities. But it is exciting to be a trustee in Sooke, and it is also a challenge. We are the largest employer in the West Shore region with over 1,500 staff serving 11,000 students. We have an annual budget of nearly $130 million. And we hold the title as the fastest growing school district per capita in the entire province. Over the last 5 to 7 years, we have been growing. In 2015, with the support of municipalities like Colwood, stakeholders in our community, we opened 2 new secondary schools, Belmont and Royal Bay, $100 million project, both that were on time and on budget, something we're very proud of. Today, we're here to share with you the growth projections we have as a school district specific to Colwood. Jim and Harold will walk you through our projections, capacity challenges, and our capital plan specific to Colwood. The Board of Education will be submitting its capital plan to the provincial government officially tomorrow after we approve it. And our hope today is after this announcement and over the next few months, if you run into a minister or the premier, or if you get a chance to book a meeting with a minister or one of their staff members at UBCM, you get a chance to talk about the exponential growth we're facing in Sooke, the amazing capital plan we have, and the hope that we can build safe and innovative new schools for our students. So I'll throw it over to Jim and Harold, if that's all right.
Thank you, Robby. We really do need to say nothing now. I think our board chair has done most of it for us. Thanks again for meeting, for allowing us to speak. We have taken our long-range facilities planning. We'd like to share the Colwood portion. It is a much larger document, but we thought it might be of interest to council to hear what we've discovered through that process. Of course, we have Royal Bay on the front cover, exciting school that we have. And this plan was written by a fellow named Bill Wood. And some of you who have been on council for a long time may have remembered Bill did one of our original long-range facilities plans back in 2011. And so he knows the district well, and he does a good job of working with your staff and the staff of the other municipalities in trying to come up with good projections for the future. So I'll just start, I think, see if this works. Try again. I'll keep going. Stand over there? Okay.
I don't even see the little arrow thing moving around on there, Amanda.
No. Perhaps we could have Harold just advance it manually.
Frozen.
Yeah. Maybe we need to start having Michael come for the meetings.
Ha! There we go.
Okay, here we go. Okay, well, there was a slide that we're going to show you how big our school district is. It's actually geographically huge. It's like looking at Northwest Territories. But most of our kids actually live in Sooke in the West Shore area. 99% of those 11,000 kids live within there. We're divided into 3 school families, and this has been a recent innovation of the Board of Education. They've decided that we're going to organize by families of schools, with a high school being the head of each of those families. The school, the family that generally fits within the Colwood area is, of course, Royal Bay, although not all of the feeder schools are in each of the municipalities. Some are in Langford and some are in Colwood and vice versa. But we do, this is how we're currently organized, and we have some schools like it's John Stubbs, which is in Colwood, that's currently feeding into Belmont because of its immersion program. Ahead of you, you see a lot of stats. I've highlighted all the yellow ones, which are Colwood schools. I don't expect people to read those stats, but what you're looking at is the capacity. If you go over to the furthest column on the right, second furthest, it says utilization. That column tells you at what level the school is currently being used. How many kids are in that school? So 100% capacity would be every seat in that school is filled. And optimally, schools should be at about 90%. 90 to 93% would be just about right. That means if somebody moves into the neighborhood, there's a seat for them to go in their neighborhood school. You can see, if you look through the Colwood schools, the highlighted yellow schools, that we have a number of schools that, well, virtually no school is at that optimum capacity. I think maybe Wishart, but we're actually putting an extra class in there next year, so it'll bubble over. And there's a number of schools that are significantly over. Royal Bay and Dunsmuir, of course, are screaming out at being 122 and 124%. And the reason they're at that capacity, of course, is because we put portable classrooms in them. Currently at Royal Bay, there are 10 portable classrooms and 12 at Dunsmuir. Significant number of classrooms. So that's an issue. Obviously, we're trying to address that. When we look at our school district, 62, we look at what is if we're projecting, can we look at what it looks like today and go into the future? That's really the question we're asking Bill when he looks to do his studies. Because yes, we know we're in a high growth time right now, but will it sustain? And the long and the short of it is Bill saying he sees no impediment to growth over the next 20 years for the West Shore region. So that's Langford and Colwood principally. So if that is in fact the case, if we're looking at 20 years of growth, and there will obviously bubbles and the economics factors into that, but we should be planning that way. It caused the board and staff to think differently about how we do our capital planning. It caused us to start thinking about, it's not okay to say, what's our next school? We need to be thinking about what are our next 5 schools? When do we need another 4th secondary school? When do we need these? We need to be more strategic in our planning. Because when we've looked through that, you'll see through all of those indicators, there's huge growth coming. Jump in anytime, Harold. Our estimates for future housing. So Bill's done this estimate of looking at what we might expect from Colwood over the next 10 years. So 950 new starts in Royal Bay, 380 in Colwood Corners, Nob Hill. You can read it yourself. But for an average growth per year of about 200. That's pretty significant.
Before you jump, Jim, I think Councillor Day has a question back a slide.
Yeah, just on your operational capacities, which had all the highlighted numbers for Colwood, I noticed that there's a difference between portables and modules. And I just would like to know what feedback you've received about that, the difference between a portable and a module, and how people feel about them?
That's a great question. And the reason we do that is because it's a ministry requirement in our capital plan. Modular classrooms were brought in the year that we started full-day kindergarten. They're significantly upgraded portables. They have a foundation. They're quite lovely inside. They have their own, they're like a separate school in itself. They have washroom facilities, etc., although most of our new portables have washroom facilities as well. But ministry expects us to use those as a part of the school because they are much more difficult to move. For example, once Royal Bay is completed, we intend on moving all, if we can, of those portables off the front of the school, where we wouldn't be able to do that with a modular. In terms of how they're received by students, parents, and teachers love them. They prefer to be in a modular than a portable classroom. It's obviously a bit nicer. I think parents like them, although they're still separated from the school, and typically it isn't the room that parents complain about, it's the fact that kids feel more isolated when they're in a portable. The portables we put in 32 portables. They're all brand new. They're actually very nice inside, except they're not attached to the school, and we want to see kids feeling connected to their schools.
Go on the next slide, Jim. And just maybe if I can tack on to what Jim has said about this slide here. So as you can see, the projected growth is pretty straight line, pretty moving up, which is a lot different than probably the last 10 years. And this is unique to the district, and I think the ministry is starting to finally realize that Sooke and Surrey and some of the larger mainland districts are growing at such a pace that the existing capital plan process is really not fitting for these types of districts. Usually the district is looking at their capital plan, they're maybe looking at a seismic project or maybe expanding a school site. We are looking at multiple, as we get through the presentation, you'll see that we're looking at multiple land purchases and multiple land builds or construction builds all at the same time. So I think we've had a lot of good conversations through the board and from ministry staff to the district staff to be able to try and address the slope of that line that is ongoing. It's fairly steep because of the exponential growth, but also that is continued for the next 10 years. So our capital plan is unique in terms of the way we outline the projects because of that growth and that long-term needs. It's not that one-off project that most districts are looking at. So we need those close relationships with the ministry staff to be able to deliver on those projects.
I think we've seen this slide. So our overall enrollment forecast looks at 37% growth in our school district over 10 years. So 3% and a bit per year. We have 11,000 kids. That's 350 kids a year. That's an elementary school every year. And it's unlikely we're going to be given an elementary school every year. So we have to be fairly strategic about the way we're thinking about it. The bottom graph breaks that down into elementary, secondary, and middle. And you'll notice that the elementary and middle is fairly stable at about 34 and 36, but secondary is growing faster. Well, how can that be? It's because right now we're in an elementary bump, and that bump will move into secondary over the next 10 years. So our kindergarten classes are typically bigger than our grade 12 classes, so we're taking more kids than we're having kids leave every year. And that's why you'll see the exponential growth in secondary. And that caused us to start thinking about, we have full high schools now. We're going to have a real problem in 10 years. We need to start paying attention to that. We picked a couple of schools, just to say Colwood schools, so you could see of what it might look like in 10 years from now. So if you look at John Stubbs, which is a French immersion only school, elementary, middle, if we don't do anything, Beauregard is, by the way, a company that does projections across the province for schools. What Bill has done is he's taken the Beauregard projections and he's come and talked to your staff to find out how accurate they are. He's applied local knowledge, and that local knowledge gives us better insight into what we might expect. Through doing the local knowledge piece, we've learned that a lot of developments weren't considered through that provincial body in the Beauregard software. John Stubbs could be over 1,000 students 10 years from now. Sangster, interesting enough, could be at 300 when it's predicted to go down by Beauregard. We're looking at Dunsmuir at being around 1,000 students if we don't do anything, and Royal Bay Secondary to be at 1,400 if we don't do anything. So those are all significant concerns. Want to talk about this?
Sure. So one of the first slides that we looked at was the operation capacity, or the operating capacity. So given the amount of capacity that we have in the existing schools right now, we're at about 104%. And as Jim mentioned early in the presentation, optimal from a ministry standard perspective is about 95 to 100. So we've already kind of obviously increased over that optimal amount. And that's why we have a number of portables throughout the district. So the challenge that we're facing now over the next 10 years, now that we've talked about that enrollment growth, the slope of that line and the speed of that line, we're looking at trying to find 4,400 or create 4,400 spaces over the next 10 years. So this includes the 600 spaces that we have down the street at Royal Bay. So the net amount is about 3,800 seats throughout the district at the three levels, at the elementary, the middle, and the secondary levels, to try and find those seats in the next 3,800 seats in about the next 10 years. So it kind of equates to the amount Jim had mentioned before, about 350 students a year. So that's the anticipated growth and the speed of the growth that we're looking at. So that's our big challenge, is to be able to try and find those 3,800 seats throughout the next 10 years. So the slides that we have up there, you've got it broken down between secondary, elementary, and middle, and then the capacity utilizations at each of those three levels in kind of 5-year increments, where we are now at 2018, 5 years out, 2023, and then the 2028. So what Robby mentioned yesterday, we'll be presenting the capital plan to the board for their review and consideration tomorrow night. It is a 5-year plan. But given that amount of growth and the knowledge we've found through the capital plan, we can't stop at 5 years, because if we just do a 5-year capital plan without the next 5-year horizon after that, we'll be in quite the pickle, and we won't be able to provide those spaces for those students. So this is, again, just taking a look at 10 years out and the amount of empty seats, or the vacant seats that we need to be able to fill to be able to house basically all the students that we're expecting.
So the plan for Colwood for us, so we're obviously been doing some thinking around here. We're right now in the process of expanding Royal Bay Secondary by 600 spaces. So long-serving council members will remember perhaps a decade ago when I did come and say we asked for a school of 1,200 and we received a school of 800, which was full when we opened that school. And it has currently at about 1,150, I think, in that school that's built for 800. That's why we have 10 portables there. And a 2-year-old school, which a lot of people are wondering why we built that. And certainly when you look at the cost of putting a 600-seat addition on, it becomes even more evident that we should have been thinking, well, somebody should have been thinking more forward-thinking at that time. Just as a complete aside, because we're working on the design piece right now, who would know that there'd be a different seismic standard for a school that was built in 2012 and a school that's going to be built in it's crazy. That we're now going to have to retrofit a brand new school to the new seismic standard to join up the two pieces. And very expensive, very unnecessary. So that's coming online. That's our first and highest priority right now. So that's occurring right now. We're in the design phase. It's being costed this week. We'll have that out for tender hopefully in the fall, and hopefully award right after Christmas, and begin what we're hoping to be a fairly aggressive 1.5-year build to have kids in starting 2022. September, that time, working in that wing. That will feature a number of really nice things. Obviously, all the classroom spaces will be connected the way they are now, so that beautiful school feeling will continue. There's also going to be a third gymnasium at the back corner. There's a lot of sports programs in that school. It's heavily subscribed. You really have to stop thinking about it as a gym and think about it as a learning space, because we need that third gymnasium. And I think, interestingly enough, it's going to have a indoor turf field flooring. Is that right, Harold?
Yep. Instead of a regular hardwood floor, I think we're looking at putting synthetic turf, so it could be multiple uses inside, which will be, I think, helpful. And maybe just taking on the point in terms of what Jim had mentioned about the opening the school at 800 and now expanding it instead of the 1,200 that was initially planned to the 1,400. It was a tough lesson to learn for both us and I think the ministry, but I think it was a lesson that has been heard. And as we are planning these new schools and the discussions we've had with the ministry staff, is the information we're getting back, or the feedback that we're getting from them, is build big. So let's build for the anticipated growth. So I think they are realizing that they see that the growth is here, it continues to come, and they're willing to consider building those schools for those projected growth as opposed to what the actual growth is at that period of time when the construction begins. So I think that is a great lesson that we've learned as a group as we go through this process, and hopefully will serve us well as we go into the future and look at more elementary and more middle and secondary schools being built in the district.
As you can see by the slide, just the West Shore side of the highway is going to produce 1,100 more elementary-only schools. So we need to actually start working on the schools. So we've been working on acquiring a piece of land in Royal Bay for an elementary school and hopefully a big-size school, as Harold just said. I just have to compliment you, Council, on your amazing staff, because they've been a pleasure to work for. Ian and his staff have been super accommodating, giving us great direction and helping us along the way of working towards, first of all, getting that land, but also doing some really cool and innovative things around sharing and partnerships in the future, and we're pretty excited about that. Along with that, we are thinking that farther down Latoria, we do own a piece of land on Latoria in Colwood that has been designated as a school site. We may end up using that at some point. That's a possibility as well. Sangster Elementary is part of our capital plan. It's a little bit farther down, but to replace that school with a larger school farther back in the field. And that's probably it for this area. We're going to have to deal with the Dunsmuir overcrowding by doing a modernization and a possible small expansion of maybe 200 seats. But we really don't want a middle school of 1,000 kids. It's just not what we're looking for. So we'll be building another middle school and redoing catchments in the West Hills area, and so that will adjust part of the current Dunsmuir catchment to sort of ease that load a bit. And that's kind of our hot spots all around this zone right now. So this Latoria Road concerns me lots of times in the middle of the night. Where are those kids going to go to school? We really have to think about that. The Royal Bay build-out, we want to make sure we have a school ready for those kids when they're coming, and what we're going to do about Dunsmuir Middle School.
So as Jim mentioned, those are kind of the hot areas where we see the population growing in terms of the developments and the density and so forth. I guess one interesting thing, and especially it's coming from the board in terms of the direction they've given us as staff, is the programs of choice. No longer, especially at the middle and the secondary schools, are you going to your catchment school, given academies and programs of choice and so forth. A lot of kids living in Langford are going to Colwood schools, and a lot of Colwood kids are going to Langford School. So we are really looking at, especially these two families, as Jim mentioned earlier, about the Royal Bay and the Belmont families, going across those catchment areas to be able to go through their programs of choice. So again, those are the hot spots where the growth will be coming from, where those kids go to school, obviously depending on where the programming that they choose is located. So that adds another complexity and another level of challenge for us as we try and look at catchment areas and get these schools online and how we kind of manage the distribution of students through these schools.
That's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions by council?
Just in your planning, you mentioned at the end here about the school destination schools, and they certainly are that. And one of the challenges with them being destination schools within the region is the traffic. So I just would like to plant the seed to think about active transportation and to find ways that we can partner to identify, support, and really promote active transportation. There's a number of problems that I notice starting in Latoria Valley, for example. There's quite a traffic jam at the end of the school day, and it's pretty obvious as people, leaving the school. And there's some really, really great corridors for cycling and walking that can take you to the same destination without necessarily having to go on the same roads as those cars are traveling on, which I understand is not that appealing. So there is designation through Havenwood Park for cycling, for example. So if you wanted to go to West Shore Town Centre, you can get there without actually having to go on Latoria, which is a bit problematic as we're waiting for further development to flesh out that road a little better. So just there's ways that we could maybe help each other to identify that and get people more interested in doing life a little more sustainably.
We couldn't agree more, actually, Councillor Day. We'd love to see kids walk to school. We have a comprehensive school health program that involves this whole notion of how do we get kids more active, not just at school, but going to school, getting back from school. And we know that parents are often concerned with safety, and concerns come in a number of things. Traffic is one of them. And so it's a bit self-perpetuating, but yes, we're totally on side with that notion.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's funny, I was looking down at my desk and I see Jim Alkin's business card in front of me, and he was he stood right where you are when he.
For us, yes, for the longest time.
Yeah, still got it. Well, as a parent that has 3 kids going through the system, one in elementary, middle, and high school, personally, I feel pretty blessed that our kids have the opportunity to go to school in this district, and I can't say enough. You know, I got to be upfront. I cannot say enough about the impact that their teachers have had on their lives throughout the year. So I think that speaks volumes about the commitment that the district and the board and staff have for doing what you do. So as a parent, I want to say thank you publicly. So you've touched on it a little bit, but just curious about the plans for the outdoor facilities. And we know the indoor facilities are pretty important, but the outdoor facilities are just as important. And I know as a parent that whose kids are very active in sports outside, would like to see some, I guess, improvements or advantages moving forward with new facilities like artificial turf and stuff like that. So these facilities are usable all year round instead of just during the dry period. So just wondering what progress has been made, maybe to utilize the new builds to upgrade facilities, and is there an opportunity or a necessity for municipalities to get involved to help facilitate those types of discussions?
I'll try and start, and Jim can jump in as well. For sure, we would love to continue to leverage those relationships. A lot of conversations that we've had with Ian and his staff are about combining the educational and the recreational spaces together. So as we go through and have discussions with the ministry, they're always very excited and happy to hear the conversations that we are having with our local municipalities, be able to leverage those spaces to be able to add facilities, add room and space for the kids and the rest of the public to be able to enjoy. You know, and Royal Bay is a great example of that. That turf field is used throughout the year, nonstop. The theater, as well as the Belmont side, as well. The amount of spaces that we have. So yes, we will love to continue those conversations, and as we identify where the locations are that we can build in Colwood, we'll have those conversations with Ian and his staff and see where it makes sense to try and leverage those. We are limited by kind of standard rates that government will give us for the recreational space and so forth. So if we are able to kind of work together and form those and continue to strengthen those relationships by expanding outdoor space or whatever it may be, whatever recreational needs that the students and the community have, we'll certainly try and do as much as we can.
Yeah, it's a good point. We start with a partnership mindset. And what I think you might find interesting is when we go talk to the ministry staff, the capital staff in particular, the relationship that we have with the municipality and municipal staff is rather unique around the province. Not every school district gets along well with the cities that they work with. In fact, it's kind of the envy of a lot of places. We've been told this a number of times, that when they find out that we're coming to them with an idea that has been maybe started by the municipality, can we partner? Can we do something together? Can we do an enhancement for the community? They think that's fantastic because they're looking after public taxpayers' dollars. And that schools are typically used Monday to Friday, close around 5 o'clock. If they can see high value for that by using it more time, then certainly the ministry is really interested in supporting our project. So I think that's our mindset to begin with.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. If we go back to your slide on the community growth prospects, it's all right. Oh, well, okay, if you want to flip back to it, that'd be great.
Sure. This one here?
No, sorry, the next, yes, that one. So fourth bullet point down there, you talk about sewer limitations in Sooke and Colwood. How is the sewer limitations in Colwood going to affect you being able to grow out to what you need within our community?
I guess, trying to think what Bill kind of wrote in that bullet is just probably in terms of the speed of the growth. With looking at our neighbors on the Langford side, the growth having the sewers throughout the system is probably accelerating that growth piece. I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. I know there's some conversations about on the Sooke side about the extent of the sewers and so forth. So I think what he's identifying there, that is just a factor. I'm not saying if it's good or bad. I think it just impacts the amount of development and the growth in terms of the enrollment growth that we'll see through the population. So that's what I think he's probably referring to.
So what I'm hearing back from you, because I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. So we're not concerned that schools within the district area of Colwood will be limited because of sewers. Okay, thank you.
I think it's strictly
I saw
around
that there, so I
growth.
just wanted to make sure that was not an issue.
Good question.
My second question is just regarding, well, both my final two questions are regarding Sangster. One of the things, and you talked about sort of the catchment, and I understand the catchment philosophy versus the destination or neighborhood. And obviously, the nature kindergarten has always been a very popular thing at Sangster, and obviously I've heard some negatives within my neighborhood because Sangster is the catchment, and of parents feeling frustrated because they weren't able to get their children into that specific program, and then frustrated because they're going, well, it's my neighborhood and I can't even get my kid in my own neighborhood school. Is there much of a pushback, not a pushback, excuse me, but is there much of a challenge around parents who would like their children to attend the school that is closest to them and them actually being able to get into that school?
Yeah, that's becoming a greater problem every year, I have to admit. Neighborhood schools, we've had to become much more restrictive about people moving, especially in elementary schools, into a school. Sangster is an interesting example because it does have a district program, which is the nature kindergarten. That one class is housed at that school, irregardless to the other kindergarten class that is not a nature kindergarten class in that school. That makes sense. Because it is a special lottery designated school. And I had mixed feelings about this lottery system, to be honest with you. I wasn't sure if it was the best way. It seems to be the fairest way, I suppose. But it is difficult to know that you could be living across the street. You want your kid to go to that program, but you can't get in because your number wasn't picked. Of course, you should be going to your own school, and that's what we're really enforcing right now. We have cross-boundary issues at a number of our schools. It isn't just this one. If you were talking about John Stubbs, there's more people mad at me at John Stubbs than there are at Sangster, actually, because they couldn't get into the French program that they really wanted, right? So it is becoming a bit of a concern, and it has never been part of our history as a school district. We've always done really well at trying to get everybody into the programs they wanted to do. It's been rather the exception rather than the rule. They don't get in. Now we're having to say, we just don't have room. The other part is that the nature kindergarten program costs more money for the district to operate. You'll have to appreciate there's 2 adults with those kids all the time, not just a single kindergarten teacher. I think that's a wonderful thing, and I think it's great that they have that opportunity and experience, but it isn't something we can just scale up without support from government because they don't fund it.
Right. I guess I will reflect back, if you look at, we're going through our OCP process right now, and one of the things that we're talking about is having a healthy, walkable community. And, it seems a bit of a shame when you have children who have that ability to walk to a school, but instead have to be put into a vehicle or a bus to be transported to a different school because they can't get into their local school. And I understand that it's just a challenge, and I'm just saying that it would be nice to be able to mesh both at the same time. So, and then it certainly isn't a criticism. It's just it's what I'm hearing back out from the community.
Very valid point. We sent 19 kindergarten kids from the Happy Valley area to Wishart this year, or will be sending them in September because there's no room where they live.
Right. And then my final question is, again, about Sangster is, when you replace Sangster, will it stay on the same property? Like, yeah, so the property, so it's actually physically be in the same location?
Yeah, typically when we replace a school on site, in Sangster, if we went in for an improvement, they would probably say it's cheaper to replace it.
Yeah.
Would be built at another part of the property. We'd keep the kids in the front until that school was done, move them into the back school, raise the front, and then build a field in the front. Typical of most schools now, that one's really close to the road. A modern school would be farther back on a site than that one, and that's more likely what you would see.
And what is the schedule on when you think that might even, like, is it a work plan of like 10 years from now, or?
It's probably in that
Probably
era.
in that range.
Probably 10 to 15. We did a presentation to the ministry staff about 2 weeks ago, and they said their replacement schedule is one school per year for the entire province. Knowing that we've got a lot of asks out there for new schools, I think that's probably 10 to 15 is probably could be realistic.
So, you know, looking at your numbers, when we look at Sangster, we're at 121% capacity right now, and I understand that you're building placing portables. If we look at a 10-year growth pattern, with that number accelerating exactly what we're looking at in front of you, does that just mean that we're going to be populated with more and more and more portables until that 10-year build-out?
We're hoping Royal Bay Elementary deals with some of those kids. So
Okay.
that would be our plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Knoll?
Yes, I had a couple of questions regarding John Stubbs because it's in my backyard. I see you have it projected growing from about 750 students to between 1,050 and 1,100 by 2028. The school is 95% full now, and it's serviced entirely by an inadequate two-lane road, only one road in and one road out of Belmont Park. It's not built to city standards. There's not enough sidewalks along the road. Belmont Park itself isn't really growing very much, so I suspect this whole increase will be imported from other areas. Why not import them to a French immersion school that has better access?
Another great question. We have no intention of growing that school to 1,000. Just put that out there. I mean, that's what will happen if we don't do anything. So right now it's a very big school, 700 kids. That's a lot for an elementary and a middle school combination. It may cause us to do different things. One of the things that we are considering is expanding the French immersion program to other schools in the district so that we can control the growth at John Stubbs. One of the real issues we're having with French immersion right now, it's a very popular program. It's been very hard for us to recruit teachers to come in to teach. This is an issue across British Columbia right now. We're very lucky to live in southern Vancouver Island, which is actually attractive for teachers to come to. If you're up in middle or northern BC trying to get an immersion teacher, you're having a real difficulty right now. But our intention is to look at all of our catchments. I guess when we talk about where we're going in 10 years, that's if we don't do anything. We intend to do lots. It's just we need to be working with councils throughout this region to make that happen, and that's why we're wanting to show you what potentially could happen if nothing happens planning-wise. But catchment areas is one of the areas we're going to be looking at. How do we rejig them? We'll probably be looking at it over this year and consulting with parents about how we adjust catchment areas.
Anything else? Good. Anyone else? Jim, Harold, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Guys.
And Ravi and Diana, thanks. Next presentation we have is in regards Pelican Drive Playground Maintenance. There is resident, Ms. Ruddick.
Hello. We're the two neighbors directly affected, and we're going to be speaking. It's in the minutes in the agenda thing, page 35 of 42 for anyone who hasn't seen it. Mayor and council members, thank you very much for your time and attention to hear local residents' concerns. Very much appreciated. We, the residents of the Bluffs at Royal Bay, are all unanimous in our concerns about the local park at the corner of Pelican Drive and Seashell Place. We went with a few others door to door talking to residents, which is a real eye-opener. They tell you lots of things. and have signatures from 97. I think that went up to 100 residents, which I have here, I'll give to you. And everyone was very positive in their concerns in supporting us about the park. These people offered many comments regarding the negative appearance of the park. This park, upon completion in 2008, was replanted after all the shrubs and plants died after the first year, which was the sprinkler system wasn't turned on, there was a miscommunication or something. The next 5 years, the park was maintained fairly well, but since then, the park's maintenance has declined, leading to increased thistle and many other weeds, and the dried out lawn in parts, because they have a lot of trouble with the sprinkler system. They're always leaning over, butts up in the air, trying to fix it. My property is most affected due to the prevailing winds, the direction of the winds, and we get a lot of winds up there. And this year, by far, has been the worst, with weeds up to 3 feet high, halfway down my property, right near it. And we want to thank you, but we assume it's the council that had the poisonous hemlock removed this week. I think it was Thursday, I'm not sure the exact day, so thank you. This park is not just a playground, as many residents go for daily walks in the area, plus many dogs exercising their owners. And I see a lot of people driving up from other areas to play with the kids there. This park should be aesthetically pleasing to enhance the area and blend in with the subdivision's landscaping, which it doesn't now. Many owners hire professional gardeners to manicure and maintain their lawns in pristine condition. We can appreciate that Colwood is financially constrained in what you can do in allocation of funds to specific departments, but attention is really needed to this park. And like we said in what we submitted, I drove around at all the parks, and from what I can see, unless I missed one, this is the only park that neighbors right directly to the park. Like the other ones are down the road, across the street, right in a wilderness area. Ours is right apart of the houses almost. It's right there. We wish it to be maintained as a park to reflect the surrounding homes. And ours are over 1 million, several of the houses up to 2 million almost. Therefore, we strongly urge the mayor and council to look at our concerns. Professional landscape ideas are required to make the park easier to maintain. The guys just can't keep it up how it is. It's obvious. Basically, that's about what I have to say. And
Yes.
Dave?
Yes, I'd just like to add what Coke has said. First, that she was the one that instigated our coming here, and of course I was in full agreement with that. And I guess she has basically said everything I think I was going to say, but let me just go through the few points I put down. We've made a number of requests over the last half dozen of years for better service of the park, and basically they've gone unheeded. And that's both been at the front desk here, and it's been with the work yard. And they just haven't done the job. That's what we feel. So that's the first one. And I would agree with Coke knocking on the doors. All residents were very eager to sign. Many suggesting we'll know if you succeed, because we'll see something happening in the park. Coke's and our home half frame the park on 2 sides. And as she pointed out, all of the property owners are quite proud of their homes and look after their properties. They're well kept. I went to the yellow pages, and I believe there are 4 pages in the yellow pages listing landscaping companies that do design maintenance work. And so obviously there are lots of people that can do this kind of thing if the will is there. Oh, let me get over here. I measured the mulch area. It's about 250 square meters. The last mulch was done possibly 3 years ago. It was very poor quality with large sticks in it, etc. At this time, there's black fabric hanging out of the bank in 2 or 3 places, so it kind of messy looking. And of course, all the people that signed, they agreed with this fact that it is kind of messy looking. And in this little bag here, I just brought one. you mentioned them. The bag is a help put poo in its place. Now, it doesn't have that in it, but it has a thistle in it, if I can get it out. Now, there are hundreds of these at the moment. They're probably 2 or 3 feet high. It was the top of a much bigger plant. So this is the kind of thing they're just going to seed, actually. So there'll be millions of seeds floating around the neighborhood if that happens. And as you suggested, our taxes are due on July 3rd of this year, and probably our average taxes are about $5,000. So for 100 people at $5,000, it's about $500,000 would come in. And I understand that Colwood doesn't get all of that money. They get about half of it, so about $250,000 would come in. It would be nice to see a bit more of that money put towards this park. And a couple of people had suggestions. One is that, the park really needs some real attention, so a professional firm come in and say, okay, this is what we can do with this space. It would be nice to have a table with benches. There's nothing there like that, so people sit on the lawn, which is fine, and the kids don't care. But they're often their adults there, their grandparents there, and one census said probably maybe like a table to sit at. It would be nice as well to have one of these dog baggy bin things that they have. There are 2 of these down at both ends of Latoria Park, down on down on Latoria, and as well on Pelican Drive, but there's nothing up at the top. And a lot of people do walk their dogs there, a surprising number. And in the park itself, because there's nothing there, there tends to be a lot of poo around on occasion, and people pointed it out. They say it's not very good with these kids crawling around with a dog poo. So it'd be nice maybe to have one of these put up there so it's easy access for people. Of course, these things being the other problem that some people use and then just drop them, so that doesn't solve any problem other than adding another plastic bag to the, but that's a whole other issue. And it would be nice, I guess, if it gets a makeover, to then have consistent maintenance, which is done where they come in and they actually do a real job, whether they're for an hour or 2 hours, whatever, they really come in and they really work at it. And basically that's all I have to say, other than that, I think it was Mark Twain that said, it's a case of mind over matter. If you don't have a mind, it doesn't matter. So I would just suggest that we have minds and it does matter to us. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. And council has agreed to moving up item 6.1.1, grant and aid request from green teams, to the next item. So if we can go with that one. And Amanda's ready.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you pointed out, Amanda Evans is here to answer any questions you might have. I'll just introduce the grant and aid application briefly for you. As you mentioned, before you have an application for a grant and aid from the Green Teams of Canada in the amount of $3,000. The normal process is to bring grant and aid requests to the Committee of the Whole in early January during budget deliberations. But given the timing of the grant submission and the timing of the pending council break, it's been brought to council for consideration now. As written in the memo, the total grant and aid budget for 2008 is $35,000. The City Council has approved $32,475, leaving available budget space of $2,525. Thank you very much.
Members of council? Councillor Day?
Thank you. Just a quick question for Amanda. Given that what we have in our budget and what you've asked for are a little bit different, if we were to approve an amount that's a little bit less than what you've asked for, would you still be able to do your programming?
Yep, we would alter how many activities we would organize in Colwood this year. So, for instance, we're applying, we have each activity costs us $2,000, and the standard across municipalities is to ask for half. and we would fundraise the remaining. So we would just, we would just change the number of activities we would have here. Yeah.
And just if that were the direction, I have another possibility for a grant application for you to another agency that I could recommend.
Great.
That might be able to help bring you up to the level that you were looking for. The Family Court and Youth Justice Committee gives out small grants to youth-serving agencies. We try not to do ongoing funding for programming, but we do small grants to help youth. And I do know that you've been really involved with Dunsmuir Middle School and a number of other schools. When I first met you, you were involved with the old Belmont School at Colwood Creek Park. So I can't guarantee your acceptance, but I can give you the application form and let you carry through with that process. That might be an option.
That would be amazing. I've been focused right now on grant writing the next couple months, so that fits in.
It's a pretty easy grant form.
Okay,
so.
great.
Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to our finance folks. Is it a big deal to find the remainder, the difference of $475 to make up the $3,000? If we were to go that
Through your worship, on a consolidated level, not a big deal. It's more about whether or not you set a limit and set the precedent if that's arbitrary or not. It just invites future applications, despite you have setting a budget early in the year. That's all.
Right, and then I would expect that you would have a grant application probably in time for the next cycle.
Definitely. This was an interesting case, and I wasn't planning on running any more activities in Colwood, but it was brought to my attention that there was an opportunity to apply, not within like after the grant period had ended. So I wanted to jump on that opportunity because of the amazing activities we've had here, and having had, like, if we didn't run anymore, that'd be 6 months, 5 months or so without any green team activities, which would a lot of schools that want to participate wouldn't have that opportunity. So I jumped on the opportunity now to apply outside of the grant period. But I don't plan to do that again.
Right, and that's kind of why we have a bit of a buffer, I think. And from my perspective, it's the value for dollar is, approving a grant of $3,000 is a no-brainer. Just knowing the amount of work that you do and that Public Works doesn't have to do, and the participation that occurs with the students as well. So I think that's brilliant, and I know Councillor Nault wants to say something.
Yes, I think council gets fantastic value out of the green team. Recently, they've done broom bash at Pitt House Park, clean up along the Esquimalt Lagoon. I have seen them up in Havenwood Park. Recently, they've been hauling school classes out to help them and educating the kids in nature and invasive species removal. I think the community benefits very well from them, and I fully support the $3,000 and encourage them to apply at the proper time next budget.
Your Worship, I'm happy to move that council supply a grant in the amount of $3,000 to the Green Teams of Canada 2018.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Amanda, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
And with this, we will backtrack, folks, to correspondence. A letter from Mr. Johal in regards to requesting artificial turf to remain at 303 Kenning Court. Mr. Johal in the audience, in case there should be any question.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. Hope you guys had a chance to read my letter and see my pictures. And I hope you guys can approve my request to keep my turf on my lawn.
Any questions from council? Councillor Day?
Thank you. I guess it's not, I've got the wrong spot in my agenda here. I have to get back. one of the things I've done since you made your presentation at the last council is to do a little bit more research. I read your letter, had a look at the pictures, and I also did some research, and I still have a strong objection to turf on the boulevard. Turf is made out of polyethylene and other plastics, and it's not recyclable. It isn't a long-term solution. The lifespan is somewhere between 15 and 20 years, and the warranties are between 5 and 7 years, warranted only to the original owner. So if you sell your home, it's not warranted. So my concern is for the amount of material that will eventually be put into our landfill, and for the lack of. I understand that you know, it's seems like a low maintenance solution, and I can understand why you would pick it. But my concern is that if your lawn doesn't work out, you compost it, and the bugs carry on enjoying the ground regardless. But when you've installed turf, then you're really creating two problems. You don't have the biology working in the ground, and you don't have the benefit of not filling up your landfill. So those are my basic concerns with it. So I do understand, and I think that you do have a beautiful home and a beautiful property.
Thank you.
And I hope that you can, there's a few properties also in that area, kind of the other side of the cliff area at Perimeter Close. There's a number of low watering boulevards that have been put in with gravel. They've used plants such as Bowles Mauve, which is very drought resistant, quite pretty, really survives well in a dry, inhospitable climate. So there are some options out there that could make it beautiful and still functional for you.
Any other members of Councillor Knoll?
I would agree with Councillor Day on that one. I have not supported a single application for artificial turf on city property, and I will continue to not support it. I think it's not nature friendly. It's, as she says, you can't recycle it. There are other opportunities to make low maintenance landscaping that don't involve artificial turf. Wood chips and Oregon grape come to mind. We have a lot of that in my yard, which is very low maintenance, very low water use. So I will not be supporting this. Colwood used to be called the City of Trees. That was before we chopped about 3/4 of them down, I think. But I don't want to see us be called Plasticville.
Anyone else? I'm looking for the appropriate staff on this. What I'm seeing in the pictures is the entirety of your front yard is turf, correct?
Yeah, it's around 900 square feet. I got nice flower beds there.
So what constitutes the city boulevard of that? It's not your whole yard.
I don't understand. Say that again.
Well, your request here is, or your letter states, to keep the artificial turf on the city boulevard.
Yeah. Well, the engineer wants me to take off the first 2 meters of it from the property line, from the sidewalk, and take it out, and then.
So take it back. So like.
So I have to put something else in there, and then I can keep my turf the rest of the area, but
yeah.
the first 7 feet they want me to take it out. So then I got to install.
So
water
that's what's not
sprinkler.
clear in the picture delineation or
Just
whatever.
trying to
I'm
make
trying
it look
to.
beautiful, right? So biggest investment of your life is your home, right? So don't want everything dead grass looking around.
So there would be an open strip or something else.
Yeah, you're gonna have
between
to
the
fill it in,
sidewalk
have
and.
something, put rocks in there, create something, right? Or you're gonna put sod in there and have real grass and then the other stuff, right? So it's not gonna look too appealing.
Okay, Mr. Joel, thank you. Councillor Trace?
I am personally in favor of letting him keep this. We've sort of set a precedent, and I've allowed one other resident to keep some artificial turf on the boulevard. I think it's actually quite aesthetically pleasing, and I'm in support of it. I would put the motion on the floor that council approve it.
I need a seconder, please.
Second.
Further discussion? Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support it. I think maybe this is perhaps where our bylaw is a little behind, because there's when you take a look at the boulevard like this, no one knows it's City Boulevard. They think it's part of the person's front yard. Just like I'm in a similar situation. No one knows that the 12 feet of boulevard that is grassed and sprinklered that I maintain is City Boulevard. People consider it as part of my property. Whereas if there's a clear delineation like yard, sidewalk, and then boulevard, then I think there's probably more of a case for us to say, there's a separation there, and it's different. This is, for all intents and purposes, the property owner's front yard. The city doesn't maintain it. The city won't maintain it. It's strictly up to the homeowner, as it is in my situation.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of a difference and I think I've mentioned it before. I think that's something that our bylaws need to kind of catch up with and clearly articulate perhaps where we need to be a little more rigorous and where there's perhaps a little more forgiveness in how we do how we treat our boulevards. And so from this perspective, I think aesthetically it would look pretty darn silly if we decided to roll up the turf. I mean, I like real grass. I'll be honest with you. I like real grass. Mine is green. But in this case, I think it would be detrimental to the environment because now we're tossing that stuff away. And aesthetically, I think the neighbors would probably have an issue if there was something different and if it was left. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Through the mayor to staff, if this motion was to pass, would we need to put something in place from a liability, not liability, but if we needed to, the city needed to cut that grass because they needed to get access to that ground, how does that work, or do we need to have some sort of agreement put in place ahead of time, or what would do that? Because with this artificial, obviously we would need to cut it to get underneath it. So, and then whose responsibility is it?
It takes you 2 minutes. You just grab it and just roll it back. The nails come out, and then you just refix it all. Put your gravel back in, sand, tamp it down, level it, and roll it back and put the spikes back in.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'd still like to understand from a staff standpoint, from a liability.
Your Worship, we'd have to look into it in more detail. I know the city's Director of Engineering has been doing a bit of research on this, but I don't know the actual outcome of it. I don't think the issue of removal is that different than if it was a landscaped area.
Okay.
The bigger issue for us has been that we have direction from council to prohibit artificial turf, which is why we've been prohibiting it. So we'll bring that back at the next council meeting to rescind, because there clearly is not that interest to do that anymore. That will solve this problem for our engineering department.
And I think what we need to do is a little bit of work in that to determine perhaps recommendations of acceptable turfs, because there's a gazillion different scales and levels of turf of different kinds. So maybe we need to identify what would be workable and what's not. Walmart rollout golf green stuff. No. So the motion on the floor is to allow this to go ahead, and then we could do we need enough second motion to have staff review the policy on this?
No,
and bring forward, they'll just come through automatically?
We typically, it's implied when we start to see a pattern from council, it's time to bring something back. So we're seeing a pattern enough to bring it back.
So with that, we'll call the question then on this particular one. All those in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed. Thank you. Passes. Next item is around the letter of correspondence in regards to the Pelican Drive Playground. We had the presentation earlier. They are now asking for some things to be done. I think what concerns me in around this is these are budgetary items and are not within the budget that I'm aware of at this point. Councillor Day.
Thank you. There was considerable work put into a maintenance plan for each park within the city when I was chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee. And so I'm sure that there must be a plan for this park. And I'm not sure quite whether the plan wasn't sufficient or the execution didn't work out, but sometimes best laid plans don't work out. Just look at some of my garden areas. Some are successful, some are not. But I think it would be appropriate, since our residents have identified this as a concern for them, and obviously for many of them, to ask staff to have a look and bring us back a report taking all those things into consideration so that we would have the whole picture. Because currently we know there's something that's making our residents unhappy, but we don't have all of the information that we need from our staff. So I would like to move that staff bring back a report.
Any conversation, discussion? Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Worship. I do agree. I think there's still some low-hanging fruit there, and if there's some weed and stuff that is about to seed, I think before staff, as staff are drafting this report, then perhaps they can go and have a boo at that area and at least take care of the weed before it goes to seed, and then we can work on some of the other items that have been identified and look for some solutions. But I just want to be proactive and not let the situation get worse with the weed, if that's a possibility.
Perfect. Councillor Nault.
Yes, I know Public Works has a budget for invasive removal. I'm not sure where they are in spending that. I know the thistle is an incredible problem across all of Colwood, and they've been working very hard to eradicate that in some of our Royal Bay parks. And it's just growing everywhere, so that might become a budget item as well, but I'd be happy to have Parks reply to that.
Great. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We received an email from Mr. Wells in regards to the bid application that they were putting forward on behalf of Greater Victoria for the 55 plus BC Games. It was a non-committal letter other than one of support to proceed with the bid, and Council, because of a timeliness, was polled, and we had response to say, and I'll just read the letter for matter. It is my pleasure on behalf of Colwood City Council to write a letter of support for the Tourism Victoria, Greater Victoria Sport Tourism Commission bid to hold the 2020, 2021 or 2022 55 plus BC Games. That's it. It's short and sweet. Move receipt.
So moved.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We've done 6.1.1, moving on to finance 6.1.2 in regards to remunerations, benefits, and expense reimbursements.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you may recall, in 2017, the federal government tabled legislation that signaled significant change to council remuneration net pay to begin in 2019. Essentially, what the legislation accomplishing is the elimination of a 1/3 tax-free allowance that council currently benefits from in their remuneration. Left unchanged, this would create significant and detrimental effect to council's net pay. Our current remuneration bylaw references the one-third allowance, so at the very least, housekeeping amendments are required prior to 2019. Staff have drafted a bylaw to try to balance the change to net pay. We've used a methodology that we believe will result in council receiving the same net pay beginning in 2019 in the current compensation policy. However, this downloading does impact local taxpayers in the form of property taxes, and the financial impacts of that change, should it be adopted, would be is identified in the report before you. The second recommendation in this report relates to council benefits. As you are keenly aware, your council term is coming to an end at the end of 2018, and a new council will be with us shortly. It's at that time that council members are individually invited to enroll in health benefits if they wish to fund it themselves through the UBCM. So staff are recommending that health benefit enrollment be included in this council orientation process. The other option being that municipal taxes pay for council benefits as well, and those are the and the financial implication. Those are also included in the report. Thank you.
Questions from council? Comment?
I just wanted to make a comment because I've been on council since a long time now, and one of the things that I have learned is you certainly don't do a council position for the money, but the money can sometimes stand in the way of your being able to do it. In other words, after you've been on council for a while and you realize the compensation is small and the hours are long, it really cuts into other things that you do, which is, again, is something that we gladly and willingly do for our community to make it a better place. But the part that really annoys me when you're trying to do your best and it takes you as long as you would as much money in minimum wage hours as you would save or make to claim for your expenses, which is recently with the Family Court and Youth Justice Committee, we've been supporting the youth clinic that's just opened on the Saanich Peninsula. They found the same type of problems. They've finally organized to have a nonprofit organization run their youth clinic so that the small incidental expenses can get paid easily without a whole lot of extra work in covering the accounting. And that is what I think the 1/3 did for members of council. So instead of keeping track of your mileage or putting in an expense for every ream of paper that you've gone through because you didn't have time to come into the city hall to get something printed out for you, and all of those incidental expenses that are just too much trouble to keep track of, and they are numerous, that I think the tax policy was a good policy. And so since that has changed, I think it's important to compensate, not myself, but the next council, whoever that may be, in a way that makes it easy for them to do what we're asking them to do, because it is a lot that we ask of people. I've gladly done it. Others gladly do it for the same reasons, I'm sure. But I think it does make a lot of sense. I thought it made more sense to have the tax break rather than having to have the citizens of Colwood pay more money. But it is a very small financial cost to pay the additional 7.5%. It's a 0.06% cost tax increase. And as far as the cost for premiums, I think that certainly not all of council would require that. And and it's a larger hit for the taxpayers. So I think it's more acceptable that council members would pay that themselves should they need it.
Councillor Knoll?
Yes, it's unfortunate the federal government has decided to do this. I've often questioned, though, that one-third allowance, whether council actually incurs that money in incidental expenses. It's a fair amount of money over the course of a year. I think what we should be doing, actually, is reviewing what council has actually reimbursed, because that hasn't been reviewed since 2004. The report in 2004 said the council workload averaged out to about 20 hours per week. I think things have got a lot more complicated. We didn't used to have 160-page agendas. We do now. To put that in perspective, in 2004, council was earning about $11.40 an hour. 2016, that was up to $12.78, which is almost what a short order works at, makes at McDonald's. So it's not like we're being grossly overpaid, and the proposal is fairly modest. It'll bring us, 2019, it would bring council up to about $15 an hour, which is probably less than our lowest paid union worker gets, and union rates are reviewed on a regular basis. So I will support that for the next council. As far as the medical benefits go, certainly I wouldn't need them. I have carried over my government medical benefits in retirement, so certainly Colwood wouldn't probably be able to provide me with anything that I don't already have. Other councillors may not be so fortunate. The other thing I would like to point out is changing the council salary is going to have different effects for different councillors depending which tax bracket you fall in. So if you're in the 40% tax bracket, a dollar raise, you only see 60 cents of it. If you're in the 20% tax bracket, you see 80 cents of that. So just a general comment, I will support the increase for the next council, and I will leave it at that. I think if we want to pass medical benefits at council expense and it being voluntary, I would also support that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Actually, I'm glad Councillor Knott brought up the tax bracket issue, because certainly this doesn't help you. It actually pushes me over the hump, so I'd be a little bit further behind. But I guess call me old-fashioned, but I work full time, and so I don't consider this a job. More giving back. So perhaps I'm old-fashioned when I think that way, but I knew going in what sacrifice it would be financially, and I guess it's one of those things. I don't think we're at the size yet where someone can quit their job and take on this role. So if we were the City of Victoria or Saanich, then perhaps it would make sense to make sure that there's some incentive, financial incentive for folks to run, because they have to give up their daytime job. We don't, and so it's I think I look at it through a different lens. I am disappointed that the federal government did change the rules, because I think it did take into account some of the expenses that we undertake as a result of our duties. I take unpaid leave from work to attend meetings downtown, that sort of jazz. So that 1/3 compensates me for that part. But anyway, so I appreciate staff bringing this forward, but unfortunately, I won't be supporting the remuneration increase. In terms of benefits, if future council members want to pay for benefits, and there's no cost implication to the taxpayer, then I don't see any harm in that. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Can I clarify through the mayor to staff? What I heard was this was a net zero. Is this a net zero?
Through your worship, it's a net zero to you, but it's not a net zero to the taxpayer.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, and for that reason, I am going to be supporting this motion. I don't think that this council or a future council should be being paid less than what I'm presently receiving. I agree with Councillor Logan that I don't think any of us do this job for the money. But by the same token, I don't think this should be a job or an ability for people who have financial means to sit at this table. I think if there are young people, if there are people who are in an economic situation that it's not as beneficial, it shouldn't be punitive. It shouldn't be a situation that public office should only be for the wealthy. And so I think there needs to be a middle ground between how much we pay, and I'm comfortable with this. And I realize it won't be popular. It's never popular when you give yourself a raise. I don't think the general public will understand that this is truly just a net zero for us. This isn't actually a 7% increase in our wages or our stipend or whatever it's called here. But I feel very comfortable with the amount.
Anyone else? With that, Councillor Chong, and then.
Great. Thank you, through the mayor. I was just going to say, from a youth perspective, exactly what Councillor Martin mentioned is someone who might, with less financial freedom, you're still not doing it for the money, but the remuneration really does help. And also for the benefits, youth, you could be in school and or under your parents' benefits. So in that case, I don't see the city paying for the premiums. You could be reimbursed. And yeah, thank you.
Councillor Holt?
Just a question to staff. If we go ahead with a 7.5% increase for 2019, that does not preclude the council from filing a Form 2200, is that correct?
Through your worship, no, it doesn't technically preclude them. I would advise against it simply because the 1/3 tax-free allowance was for those incidental expenses. So if the gross remuneration is increased as a result of that being eliminated, it would be pretty well in bad faith to claim those expenses.
So we need a recommendation, move in second?
Sorry, your worship. Council does not need to pass a resolution here if council does not wish. The bylaw is on the agenda.
We'll take it under the bylaw then, and including the health benefits enrollment?
Correction, not including the health. So yes, a resolution for health, please.
So we need a motion for that section, which as it says there, would allow the individual to sign on or not by their own token.
Just by way of clarification, the recommendation at the bottom of page 3 includes consider the bylaw that's on the agenda tonight for 3 readings, and that staff be directed to offer enrollment to members of council as part of the council orientation process, with premiums to be reimbursed by individual members. So that is...
So we're severing.
Oh, okay.
A will get passed under the bylaws section, and
Yeah.
B now.
Okay.
That's what I was trying to clarify, what resolution we needed for right now.
So the resolution on the medical premiums is no cost to the taxpayer. If you want to sign on for premiums,
Yep.
each councillor would pay their own way.
Yeah. So, Councillor Nault, are you sticking with making the recommendation for B? That's all we're dealing with, because we'll do bylaw. Yeah. So B.
I'll move B. How's that?
Second.
Councillor Martin is moving B, which says, just to be clear, staff be directed to offer health benefit enrollment to members of council as part of the November 2018 council orientation process, with premiums to be reimbursed by the individual members of council, so there is no impact to the financial plan.
Unless Councillor Noel would like to move that.
Councillor Martin moves. I need a seconder.
I second.
Councillor Logan, we're on board. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Next one is 6.1.3, the Sophie report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you have the 2017 Statement of Financial Information report as recorded by the Financial Information Act, prepared by the Deputy Director of Finance as capstone to the well-done audited financial statements as well. Annually, Council must approve this statement, and so must the Director of Finance. This statement complements the already approved and audited financial statements with additional disclosures, including council remuneration, employee remuneration, payments to suppliers for goods and services, and grants. So staff is recommending that the statement be approved by council. Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 6.1.4, report again from Director of Finance in regards to the 2017 Annual Development Cost Charges Report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Another statutory report required by local government legislation. This local government legislation requirement is mostly covered off by our financial statements. So we're considering harmonizing it with our financial statement preparations next year, along with a SOFI as well. However, this report details the movement within the development cost charges accounts through the year and is prepared for council approval. Thank you.
Motion to receive.
So moved.
Any discussion, comments, questions of staff? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Item 6.1.5, Director of Corporate Services in regards to the 2018 Christmas closure proposal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is our annual request or proposal to council for our proposed Christmas closure. This is our 20th year, I think, asking council to approve closing on the last business day before Christmas through to January the 1st. So this year that would see the city offices or all city offices closed Monday, December 24th through Tuesday, January 1st of 2019, with all offices reopening on Wednesday, January 2nd. We encourage all our employees to use their vacation, banked, or flex time during this period to bridge the 4 work days that aren't covered by statutory holidays or the weekends. And of course, they must follow the work alone procedures if they're found to be working by themselves. And so tonight we're just asking council to consider our proposal for that shutdown December 21st through to January 1st, reopening on January 2nd.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Finally, under Finance, report again from Director of Corporate Services, council meeting scheduled for Monday, the September 10th. Is it council's desire to reschedule that or cancel the meeting due to UBCM date having been moved from its usual time slot in September earlier to accommodate upcoming election?
Madam Mayor, I would move the recommendation that the meeting be cancelled unless there is business that cannot wait until the next regular meeting of council for Monday, September 24th.
Thank you. Seconder?
Second.
Discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Moving now into bylaws, we have one bylaw before us, and that is bylaw number 1732 for first, second, and third readings in regards around the previously discussed council remuneration bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
You can always give it back, you know.
Yeah, come on.
I want to feel like Rob feels when he's opposed.
Looking for second. Any discussion? Councillor Knoll.
Yes, I note A and B give council a retroactive increase to January 1st, 2018. I would move amendment to delete section A and B and just have C, D, E, and F.
Second on that?
I'm confused. Is it just because it says 2018?
Your Worship, the January 21st, 2018 annual remuneration was calculated to include the expected increase in 2018. So it's in line with what the original bylaw already says, just rounded to a clean $100. So council is due an increase this year according to the current bylaw, depending on what staff increases are. So this anticipates that increase and just cleanly puts it in the bylaw.
Okay, so in which case I withdraw my motion. If that was covered. I was just wondering why we have to pass a bylaw if there's already a bylaw to do that.
Through your worship, we don't have to wait for labor relations to conclude, just operationally.
So that's withdrawn? Okay, so it is as stated there and for the reasons as stated by staff. We had mover, seconder, so all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Looking for third?
Feels so good, Rob.
Second for third?
Sure.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Nothing to release from in camera?
Move adjournment.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.